quick picks.
Some of these critics, these pundits,
I absolutely adore them lads. I have unbelievable time for them, but they're a great bunch, but it's not acceptable.
They like to play the hard man when they're on it. It's not very pleasant when you're trying to manage a team. All you're looking for is a bit of civility and a bit of decency, but they just miss you like you know, you have nothing to do with the bloody occasion.
Well, good morning to you, Tommy. How are you getting on?
Morning, chaps.
Morning, lads. Scandalous omission of not having hurling predictions last week for the start of the league. Thankfully now, with the football break, we get to do all the hurling quick picks across Division One this week.
Well, you need to focus more on not calling draws to, you know, that's where the real beef is in this thing.
But the draws may well be, Adrian, where the profit might be from this week, because there's going to be one or two, I think, quite close games, not to spoil the predictions coming up in a few minutes' time. And on this show, oftentimes we like to kind of nail our colours to the mast and go, that team's going to win, they're going to destroy the other team. I think this weekend there's a couple of games where draws could potentially happen.
The great caveat in all this is that, Will, you're campaigning for more importance to be placed in the hurling league, and then you decline to remove Limerick off the top of your power rankings after they were beaten in the hurling league. So does it matter or does it not, Will?
Look, if any lesson was learned from last year on, it was the people who questioned Limerick after 3 games of the National Hurling League when they hadn't won, and people were wondering, maybe this Limerick team are coming towards the end of a cycle, or are they having a stuttering start? Is COVID affecting them? Are they going to be the team that we thought they were last year when they go into a knockout championship later in the year? And Limerick went on to be the best team in the country again. They've got so much credit in the bank, it is going to take a little while to knock them off the top of those power rankings. Even if they don't win against Galway this weekend, I think Limerick, just based on what they've done over the last 3 or 4 years, are going to sit top for a while. And this is a Limerick team without Cian Lynch. He's been ripping it up in college hurling as opposed to inter-county. And again, I think they'll just keep going without him. And maybe Limerick might learn a little bit about their panel against Galway this week as well. Can we have a look at the standings? Have we got a mark?
Oh, I don't know if we have the table.
We know standings. Is that because this is usual crap where I do really well and then it just doesn't appear for a couple of weeks, and as soon as I get knocked off the standings, suddenly before you know it on, it's like, you know.
Well, you had the first week off, Adrian, so I don't know.
I know, and I think I'm still probably ahead of a couple of you.
Look, we're all here for a good time, Adrian. It doesn't matter about the table at this stage.
Limerick against Galway.
Top.
Limerick against Galway. Well, so the truest endorsement of what Eoin has been talking about there would be for you to go for Limerick this weekend. We can take a look at which way everybody's going. And Will, you're that fence, you back in the fence.
Splinters right here. Yeah, this thing, and this isn't trying to appeal to Galway people who are annoyed about where they were in the power rankings in the opening week. I genuinely think that with Limerick, what we saw last week, very low scoring for them to only score 11 points at Wexford Park. I'm not saying that they're going to be vulnerable, but this Galway team started very well, albeit against, you know, opposition coming out of Division 2 from last year. They scored 4-22, could easily have scored 7-22 or 8-22 last week. So they've started the season with a big kind of scoring intent about them. We didn't see that about Limerick, where they got tied up, particularly their full forwards last week. Why can't Galway, Saturday night hurling, under the lights at the Gaelic grounds, go and put in a big performance under Henry Shefflin tomorrow and keep Limerick to a draw? I think Limerick will still rook out a result out of the game, but I think this game is going to be very close, and whoever wins it is probably going to only win it by a couple of points anyway. And we've had some good battles between these sides. It makes for good matchups, even, you know, with Galway having a slight difference in personnel this year, and obviously Joe Canning's not around this time round, but similarly Cian Lynch is not going to be in midfield for Limerick on Saturday night. I think they match up very well with Limerick physically, and as a result I think this is going to be close. Even if it doesn't end up being a draw, I'd be surprised if there was more than a couple of points between the sides come full time.
They can't be as bad as last weekend, Tommy, is my logic for Limerick here.
100%, Adrian, and I agree with Will. I think it is going to be close, and I think that Henry is going to get a tune out of Galway very, very quickly that we're all going to be impressed by. But I just think with Limerick there has to be a sting in the tail, and I know this is something that we said about Dublin after beaten by Mayo, and it rolled into 3 defeats in a row now, but the colour looked like it had drained from the Limerick faces the last day after Wexford. So they are definitely not in the same arc as Dublin in terms of the great teams that we've been seeing at the minute. Limerick aren't finished yet. They aren't, I don't think they're on the way down yet, so I'd be expecting them to come back with a bit of a vengeance this weekend, and I think it will be close-ish, but I do think Limerick will pull away and win by maybe 5 or 6 is what I'm calling.
Wow. Your margin is not. My margin is definitely not that big.
No, not. I think Will could be onto something with the draw here. It's a really good, interesting early marker for Galway this year to kind of see where they are in relation to Limerick, because the notion has been out there over the last little while that Galway may have the physicality to beat a team to beat Limerick, and I guess they, to a point, proved that last year in the league, but as Limerick proved then, they don't really care too much about this competition, which is why I'm not overly confident in my prediction, but backing against Limerick just feels like not a correct thing to do at this point, or at any point.
Concur with that. Antrim against Dublin is one that, on the face of it, we've all gone one direction, and we could all look like mugs will come Sunday evening here. Like, my main thing is I'm sort of half expecting natural order to resume after some outcomes or certainly some scorelines last week that maybe made a few of us question what we were thinking about it. But like, there is also, given the conversation we've just been having, a big case for Antrim here. They did very well last year. They took a couple of big scalps. Dublin, interestingly, in the league last year had most to spare over them, and that's probably why I'm leaning a little bit for Dublin in this one.
Yeah, look, Dublin has started the year extremely well. They won the Walsh Cup. They put Wexford to the sword in Croke Park a few weeks ago, just before the start of the campaign. Dublin backed up that performance by getting a very credible draw against Waterford last weekend, even having to battle after the cards that were handed out in the second half. And similarly, I saw Antrim play against Offaly in the Walsh Cup a few weeks ago, where Antrim put out pretty much their first strength 15. And in a game where they had to play a man short for more than a half, they actually won the second half 14 against 15 against Offaly. If they hadn't been so far behind at half time in that game, Antrim could well have won. And then Antrim went and played Kilkenny on the back of their games against Galway and Offaly, where they played reasonably well in the group stages of the Walsh Cup, and put in a really good performance against what would have to be called an experimental enough Kilkenny team. Kilkenny would probably be closer to their first team for their game against Tipperary this week, but Antrim definitely impressed in defeat last week. And that makes this one a really difficult one to call, especially, like, let's see how Dublin are on the road. But I think Matty Kenny is targeting the start of the year for Dublin to try and get off to a really good start. And so, unfortunately, boringly, I've gone with you guys in picking up a Dublin 2 points here.
It's the one game that it's guaranteed to end in a draw now, Will.
Be typical.
I thought when Tommy was talking about the Dublin arc earlier on, he was referring to the Dublin hurlers, because they're just going to the moon at the moment, aren't they? And there's no stopping them. And I would be surprised that even in the confines of Corrigan Park were they to get beaten. That's cliche bingo with Antrim. Very passionate people up there in and around certain parts. Corrigan Park, tough place to go. These two things are definitely true and would make you question backing Dublin in that sort of environment. But as Will says, they've been excellent so far this year. I think this is going to be another win for Dublin.
Yeah, and they've beaten Clare, they've beaten Laois, like they're all the cliches you want, but actually Antrim have, I think, a good case on this one. Tommy actually reminds me a little bit like Charlie Haughey, because depending on whatever county you land on, he's got, it's like Tommy Bingo here. He's got associations with so many counties around the country that he's his bias knows no bounds. So Clare against Wexford, I have to say, a game that I was totally torn on. I'd written down one thing and then I changed it. And then, having sent it through, I thought, I need to change it again. But anyway, I've gone for Clare. Let's see which way everybody's going. Needless to say, Tommy is with me, and the other two lads are going against us.
I thought this was a very, very tough one. I'd be intrigued to hear what Will's logic was in this, because on the one hand, Clare, I don't think we've got a team sheet yet, do we? John Connon could be back for Clare this weekend, which is obviously a huge addition. They were second best against Cork last week, so you're going to need an improvement for them. The whole control on this is Cork. How good were Cork last week? Were Cork that much better than Clare, or were Clare bad? We don't know yet. We'll know this weekend. I'm hedging my bets on the fact that Cork maybe beat them relatively healthily last week without being amazing. Wexford's defence last week gives me great encouragement, playing a lot of big men at the back, which I just feel is conducive to a pretty good league campaign. I know Limerick weren't great last week, but 11 points, their lowest total since 2010 in a league game. That's an extremely impressive defensive outing from Wexford. I will back a defence in this sort of thing in league time. The one issue that I really kind of weighed up at the end is the venue. And if you want to roll that cliche bingo again, the venue thing is a massive facet when it comes to Wexford in particular, and Wexford Park. This game not being in Wexford Park and being in Cusack Park instead, I feel is a real feather in the cap for you guys tipping Clare. And I guess the fact that Clare won this fixture by 3 points last summer as well suggests that they are a little bit better, but I'm backing Wexford to just close that a little bit, and the fact that their defence looked so good last week.
Yeah, well, you talk about Limerick. Wexford scored nothing themselves, and that's a big part of my rationale. And I also think that I'd go heavy in on Owen's point, Tommy, about Cork. I would say they're just a really good team, so that would be my logic for expecting a Clare bounce back.
Similar to your point there, Adrian, Clare were a point up after 25 minutes or 23 minutes the last day, and it was incredible. Cork spelled them before half time. I think they put up 1-9, and the game was essentially over then at half time. like, this is Brian Lohan's third year in charge of Clare. They would have been really disappointed with coming home from Cork the last night. They're at home. He's going to want to make a statement. I think home form in the league, or home advantage in the league, is a big thing. And I don't think there's a whole pile. I know Will has done his power rankings out and he's been getting a bit of grief for them, but I don't think there's a whole pile between the teams in the middle pack, between Galway and ninth, in and around to the probably number 2. Who's number 2 in your power rankings? Will?
Cork at the moment, but just ahead of Waterford, but not a huge amount in that.
There really isn't a huge amount between those 8 teams there. They all have an opportunity this year to possibly challenge Limerick. So I just think, Clare, there's going to be a response in Cusack Park this weekend. You saw the incredible story during the week of St. Joseph Tulla winning the Harty Cup, beating Ardscoil Reach. Like, if you don't get a response off the back of that, I don't know.
The response, I think, Will, is going to come after Davy's comments on the Sunday game. I suddenly found myself going, what's he going to have to say about this? This is going to be epic. And he was pretty critical of them, wasn't he? Was it a positional, they don't know what they're doing type comment?
Yeah, like, as the philosopher Chris Eubank once said, this game has a little bit of spice about it. And like, these teams have met so often in Championship in recent years as well, and maybe a little bit of the beef, to use Owen's terminology, has been taken out of it at this stage, because it's not Lohan against Fitzgerald, but still, it's weird how he's now a looming presence because he's become a pundit on the Sunday game. So it's going to be intriguing to see what his comments are going to be about either his native county or about Wexford when we get the highlights on Sunday evening. But you look at this game, and the intriguing thing about it is Clare definitely drifted out of it, and Cork were able to get scores at will last weekend. I don't think they're going to defend as loosely as last week. And my concern would be that when I was putting this prediction in yesterday, I actually thought that Rory O'Connor was potentially going to be back for Wexford this weekend. He's been nursing a hamstring injury and then wasn't able to play Sigerson last night, which would indicate that he's not going to be back for this weekend. So it's a Wexford team going to Ennis without Lee Chin and without Rory O'Connor. And given how many scores Rory O'Connor gets for the team, it puts a lot of pressure back onto MacDonald to almost carry a lot of the scoring load and Jack O'Connor within that forward line for Wexford, which makes me wonder about the prediction. This one is like such a difficult one to call as a result of that. And Clare people will probably think they've got the number over Wexford in Championship over the last couple of years and that they'll just carry on and win this weekend. I think there'll be a response from Clare, but if Wexford hurl with the type of manic aggression that they showed against Limerick last week, I think they've got a good chance of upsetting it in Ennis on Sunday afternoon. Going
to scoot through a few of the next ones. Offaly Cork, we've all gone one direction on that. Waterford against Laois, we've all gone one direction on that. And then Tipperary against Kilkenny. Let's take a look here. It's tip across the board. It's another one that, like, who the hell knows?
Can I just say, Adrian, before we go on to Kilkenny and Tip, the one thing to remember is that Laois put in a really strong performance against Waterford in the Championship last year, which is almost like a catalyst going into this year, is that if they can perform the way they did in that qualifier, they've got a chance of advancing from where they were under Cheddar Plunkett at the start of last year. And Laois, they're without Paddy Purcell because he's suspended after the red card from last week against Tipperary. But again, they hurled very well against the new look Tipperary team last week. So I know we're kind of writing it off and Cork should win handsomely in Burr against Offaly, but Laois could actually put it up to Waterford in the other game. I fully expect that Waterford are going to win, but I think you have to respect the way Laois hurled against them last year.
It's only that you mentioned Laois, you should all feel embarrassed, yourself and Tommy, particularly after last weekend, and the comeuppance that Laois were on the end of again at the hands of Westmeath. I don't know what you lads are thinking. Like, it totally undermines any credibility that you have in any of these conversations ever. The nonsense on that they keep banging on.
There was a comment on the...
I did not call Laois. It was a misgraphic if you watch it back.
There was a comment on the Football Power Ranking saying that I and Westmeath need to get a room. Turns out we have a room.
Wow.
Me and Adrian Barry on a Friday morning.
Now this is we're moving into proper spice bag territory here. You're going with Tip on?
I'm going with Tip in this one. Yeah, like I think that the Kilkenny performance, the mystery of the Antrim performance last week, given it wasn't on League Sunday, is something that we're looking at in kind of cold numbers, and the Tipperary kind of recovery after the loss of the Mahers is going to be something that possibly gives them added motivation over the course of these next few weeks. There are a couple of spots up for grabs in that team. They're playing at home this weekend. For me, it's just edging it. Like I appreciate why Will is going for a draw in a lot of these games, because these games are patently close and impossible to call. we do realise that like there's a small probability of a draw. There is a greater probability of just picking a side in defence here, Will. So I think he should be applauded rather than being criticised for sitting on defence too much.
Yeah, look, Kilkenny obviously will be watching on tomorrow afternoon to see how TJ Reid and his teammates at Ballyhale get on, and he transforms them when he comes back into the team in a few weeks' time. Without him now, you look at how experimental they went against Antrim last week. I'm intrigued to see 9 o'clock tonight when the team sheet comes out from Kilkenny, because Cody tends to put out a pretty legit team ahead of the weekend. What kind of side Kilkenny pick for this week? Because last week, obviously we didn't get to see the footage of it because it wasn't shown in the highlights, but in all the reports there was a feeling that Kilkenny had deliberately gone a little bit experimental week on, not in a disrespectful way to Antrim, but they knew they had Tipperary week 2, so it was a good chance to maybe try some players out and to look at positions on week 1 and then to try and go towards a stronger team when they play against their rivals. Kilkenny and Tip could be playing over Tiddlywinks, and they're going to go at each other on Sunday afternoon. So I'm intrigued to see what kind of response Kilkenny put up after being a bit lacklustre last week. And Tipperary, I saw a bit of the video of the game against Laois. They had weird stages in that game. I know missing the penalty would have put them into a very comfortable position, and they almost left Laois in the game, where Enda Rowland, the Laois goalkeeper, was able to send over some long-range frees to keep them within touch. But Tip will feel that they probably should have killed the game in the second half when Laois went down to men. Weren't able to do so. And let's see if they can find that clinical edge when they play against Kilkenny.
The AIB All-Ireland Club Championship finals obviously this weekend as well. Let's take a quick look at which way we've all gone on this. I'm going for Crokes. This is my Tommy hat on, but also I do think they'll win it. Like I think that.
What's the argument for it, Adrian?
It's been. I know that people are saying, obviously, without Paul Mannion, that they might come a cropper, and I also think there's a bit like everybody hates us and we don't care about Kilmacud Crokes in terms of the narrative that builds around them. But
can I ask? Like, obviously, you've got a good insight here as coach of the under-3s at Kilmacud Crokes. What are you seeing at grassroots level that's inspiring you?
It's the under-6 zone. Let's get it right here. Let's get it right. Like, look, I definitely think you could watch Crokes this year and come to the conclusion that you three mugs have come up with. I totally accept that there have been games where they've played a half of football and have managed to scrape over the line, and I just think that that's not going to be the case this weekend. That I think they'll turn up for the full game, and we'll get it done on. And I'll be down there in Glenalban afterwards with a pint in hand, enjoying myself. That's kind
with
of
your cheese. Your wine and your cheese.
Yeah, big weekend. Big weekend. Kilmacud and Ireland. All the guys are at this weekend. Like, Tommy, I actually just want a question for you. Is this like your nirvana this week? Seeing Kilcoo 4 points, Kilmacud 5 points at full time at the weekend. Like, is this what you live for as a GAA dyed-in-the-wool fan?
Are you saying that I'd like to see a brawl this weekend? Absolutely.
No, I mean it's going to be turgid. There's every possibility that it's going to, like, sometimes we see these two teams like this who play football that hasn't been amazing during the year. Effective, don't get me wrong, and the game ends up being a cracker. Like, I mean, it sometimes defies all logic. But if we're assuming that it's not going to defy logic, we're not expecting a belter this weekend.
No, I think you're right. I think it is going to be that type of game. Although, like, I do think Kilcoo are a different animal than what Crokes have met so far this year. I think Crokes have got away with it at times. I think against in Pearses in the semi-final, Pearses will probably have regrets about not going for that game enough when they probably had the chance to. And Crokes were very good at managing that game as it went on. I just think Kilcoo with the Brannigans, they got away with what happened at the end of the game against Finbars. I just think there's too much quality in that field from Kilcoo across the board. They're sick after Cara Finn bet them after extra time in 2019. They feel like this is their chance, and I just think Adrian's going to be crying into his cheese board on Saturday.
Let's see what way the hurling has gone. It's a split vote there, and we don't have a huge amount of time to get into it, but we do have, just before we leave the quick picks, Will's 30-second review of Les Mis.
Really good, very good production. I had to wait quite a while for this as well, Adrian, because I think I bought the tickets about 2 years ago, and it was like a year lead in to when it was due to be on last summer, and then COVID-19 intervened, and it's primarily the London cast who've come over, so it's a really, really strong cast. Lots of, the actor who's playing Javert has been doing Les Mis since 2002, so that just goes to show how talented the cast were. But the choreography is excellent. The use of the backdrops and the Bord Gáis was just incredible. Les Mis is a fantastic musical anyway, and if people, there are still a few tickets available, because I'm guessing some people probably sent them back when they weren't able to go at this time of year when it was rescheduled. It's running for a few weeks. I think it's running for 3 weeks at the Bord Gáis. If you got a chance to get tickets, go and watch Les Mis.
Will O'Callaghan has not been paid for this slot, and nor was he teed up about it. That was an incredible review. What's the main song in Les Mis?
Probably Bring Him Home, maybe One Day More. There's a load of hits.
Bring Him Home. How does it go?
Bring Him Home is like the massive solo that Jean Valjean has early in Act 2.
It's a blaster, Will. That's
No, I'm not singing. I'm definitely not singing one of the most difficult songs to sing on a solo out of nowhere on OTBAM with no music behind me whatsoever. I want to come out of here with some credibility. The hurling rankings.
Well, the credibility is gone.
Yeah, the quick picks in the hurling rankings steal the credibility enough. Let me leave with something out in the studio this morning.
Thanks, lads. That's quick
Cheers.
picks.
Cheers.
I absolutely adore them lads. I have unbelievable time for them, but they're a great bunch, but it's not acceptable.